Everyone, Justin Trudeau was speaking in BC and the CBC killed the story? What? Kind of weird, right? I thought it was weird. So I looked at this tweet stream and I watched the video. And, well, I've got some questions, and I think you will too. Here's the tweet stream. It says, Adam J. Salise, who is a candidate for an MP in St. John's, he says, "Thank you for being honest about Justin Trudeau running a taxpayer-funded election campaign instead of one financed by the Liberal Party. When will Elections Canada step up? Why did the CBC News kill this story?" And here's the link to the story. Here's the killed story. Can't find this page, and the link will be in the description if you want to have a look for yourself. It's really weird. It says he's got some screenshots of the cached copy, the Google cache, but then he finds the video, and we've got the video here, and I've got it all queued up, mostly 702. Yep. And here's my questions. Toss them on here. He's asking about, well, here we go. It's very interesting, and it's even more interesting that the way Justin Trudeau answers these questions. He answers the first one in two parts, but the second part has absolutely nothing to do with the question asked at all. We're going to skip that, but if you want to watch it, you should. It's interesting just because he doesn't answer the question at all. I mean, it's 2 minutes. We might watch the whole thing. We'll see.
Should be held.
Hi, Prime Minister Bob Mackin, Breaker.News. This is your fifth trip to British Columbia since May 22nd. You've got a Cash for Access fundraiser tonight. You had two on May 22nd. You had one last week in Victoria. You've been flying out at great frequency. I know there's an election approaching, but by calculations of experts, it's more than 10,000 liters of fuel, jet fuel, to go back and forth between Vancouver and Ottawa, and about 20 tons of CO2. And you're also spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, which would be Canadians to find out, especially with access to information and that system that you actually haven't improved as you promised you would in 2015. Why isn't the Liberal Party of Canada paying the entire bill of your trips out to British Columbia at this time?
First of all, we were pleased to transform our electoral fundraising system at the federal level to demonstrate a greater degree of transparency and openness than ever in the past. And we've continued to encourage the Conservative Party and the NDP to follow the new rules put down, including proactively inviting the media to come attend our public fundraisers that are held in public locations. These are things that we've made so that Canadians can continue to have confidence in the electoral financing. Secondly, as you know, as Canadians know, BC is a second home to me. This is a part of the country that matters deeply, and too often decisions made in Ottawa have negative impacts here in BC when people aren't connected here on the ground. Perfect example of this was the Harper government's decision to shut down the Kitts Coast Guard base, which was something that left all Vancouverites of all different political stripes scratching their heads, wondering how people could so not know how important this base is to Vancouver, to people across the Lower Mainland. So these are the kinds of things that means we have to have a federal government that is here and present and going to continue to engage with.
Okay, and this is where I'm going to pause it because I don't know if he just stumbles on the words or whatever, but the stream is no good. How unfortunate for us, really. And it kind of picks back up here. And so he pushes the question. He says, please, can you speak to the expenses? Because that was the question. Why isn't the Liberal Party paying for the whole trip? And you've kind of talked about electoral or electoral reform, which you ran on but didn't actually do, except in ways that Canadians don't want. And then you ignore the question. And he continues to ignore the question. To talk about how BC is a second home for him. I wonder if there's some loophole that says the Prime Minister can use the jet whenever they want to go home. So if he's, it's second home, like if that makes it okay somehow, I don't know. I just think it's an interesting, with the way that Bob loaded the question, right? You know, like you've been flying on 5 times from May 28th to now. Why isn't the Liberal Party paying for this? You're campaigning, like clearly you're campaigning. And he's just, look at that smug, you know, I'm going to answer your question in exactly the way I want, which is to say not answer your question at all. Okay, here's the 9:35, 9:30. It's going to be bumpy until about 42 or something like that, but it works.
About the costs of this trip and why the Liberal Party is paying. Can you at least say how much the cost is to taxpayers for this current trip, which includes a fundraiser, which also included your time off in Tofino? How much are taxpayers paying for these?
The Prime Minister has a responsibility to be Prime Minister for all Canadians, and that is part of why I spend an awful lot of time getting out there and meeting with Canadians, listening to them, being at important events like this. It is, in fact, one of the best parts of my job, to get out and meet with Canadians right across the country, whether it's town halls where we have an opportunity to take questions from the general public and actually respond to those questions in a way that no other party leader does, whether it's coming out for important announcements that demonstrate that the cuts that Conservatives consistently put forward end up harming our environment and harming Canadians. These are the kinds of things that make a big difference in people's lives, and that's why I'm so glad to be back here in BC.
Questions about your spending, sir. Questions about your spending. Please answer about your spending, sir.
Hi, Prime Minister.
You know, it's the Canadians.
Canadian press. This is from my colleagues in Ottawa.
So I wanted you to hear he yells after. He says, you owe it to Canadians to answer the question about the expenses. And he does. He does. He absolutely does. It's unbelievable that he can sit there and have a question that is this clear. Like, this is not a question that you could misunderstand. And still, this is the answer that Trudeau gives. I don't see how anyone can support this disaster. Like, this is a mess. This is an absolute mess. And making it worse, compounding it, is the wholesale purchasing of the media. Like, they didn't like this story, so it was killed, right? And I'd love to hear from the CBC if they've got an explanation for this. But Trudeau doesn't have an explanation for this. He doesn't have a way to wiggle out of responsibility for answering these questions. These are questions that need to be answered. We have electoral rules. Why is the government paying for you to campaign in British Columbia? You've got a Cash for Access event tonight. Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable that you, as Prime Minister and leader of the country, with everything that's going on, including the story that I spoke about, the United Nations corruption scandal, and Jessica Yaniv, and all of the things that are happening in Canada, and you come out and talk about how BC is your second home in answer to a campaign finance question. It seems so tone deaf that I'm shocked you aren't cratering in the polls. Honestly, really, it's incredible. It's incredible, and a testament to, well, how controlled the polls are. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca and have a wonderful, wonderful day.